Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the politics behind Rishi Sunak's speech to the National Farmers Union yesterday. It was billed as the first time a Prime Minister had spoken to the conference since Gordon Brown. Now, why do you suppose that Sunak is the first of a string of 5 Tory Prime Ministers in a row to address the conference? Because the Tories are panicking about the rural vote. That's why. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, Conservatives the world over can always rely on the rural vote, can't they? There are lots of reasons for this, which I'm not going to bother going into now, other than to note that part of the deal is usually some consideration of rural communities by those Conservatives when they're in government. But shall we take a look at some of the ways in which the Tories have been neglecting their share of the covenant in recent years? The first is, of course, Brexit. It's a big one. Latest reports show that UK food exporters to the EU have been hit with an extra £170 million of red tape, which has led to a fall in exports of meat by 17% since 2019. Particularly hitting, as Brexit always does, the small businesses which the Conservatives claim to be the party of. Brexit has also meant difficulties in getting seasonal workers, access to vets, as well as workers throughout the food supply chain. Then there's flooding. Complete lack of any flood defence strategy means that some rural areas are getting battered on an annual basis. This is not only a problem for those living in the area, but it also damages food production as well. As a result of one thing or another, our overall level of food production has struggled, and we are more reliant on imports, especially from much further away, thanks to our Brexit trade barriers. And then there are the usual aspects of Tory policy which hits everywhere, but are keenly felt out in the country as well. The Tories have literally cut the number of bus services in half, and that is disproportionately affecting rural areas. Also, the lack of new home building has left them behind. Now, the Tories could get away with all of this if people living in these areas felt there was no better alternative. But that is no longer the case. The Tories used to benefit from the fact that the obvious alternative was to vote for the Lib Dems. You would never vote for Labour in these areas. But all you would then get was maybe a stronger voice in Parliament, maybe someone standing up for your community in Parliament, but not an MP with the power to do anything. But now there's a bit of a pincer movement in rural areas. Labour have emerged as credible to a lot of people living in these regions, which means that there's the real prospect of a lot of Labour candidates winning in these traditionally strong Tory areas. And the other side of the pincer is that Labour are heading for government. So your local Labour MP will have access to government ministers. So now rural voters are being given an alternative to the Tories who will actually have the power to deliver. And this is why the Tories are stepping up attempts to woo rural voters now. In my area, one of the local feckless Tory MPs is trying to publicise a pot of money for, there's this support money for farmers. If you need help filling the forms in, I'll give you some help. Now, the amount is, of course, as usual, pathetic when you spread it across the whole country. But I don't think he's trying to persuade farmers. I think he's trying to persuade people in rural areas. I think the farmers know that the Tories are screwing them over now. I'm not sure we're going to see a lot of vote Conservative signs in fields, as you know, during the general election, as we normally do. But farmers only represent a few votes themselves. This is an attempt, I think, to persuade the locals that farmers are being looked after by the government. And the farmers can't go around everyone going, no, they're really not. Rishi Sunak said in his speech that he had farmers' back. So I've got your back, he said. Yet he was unable to address, as far as I can tell, any of their concerns when asked. When he was tackled about the damage that Brexit's done to the industry, he basically said, oh, it's a work in progress. When he was asked about the post-Brexit trade deals which will undercut British producers in their own market, he said that the government is committed to making sure that they're not undercut. Well, I mean, given that the only notable feature of these trade deals is they allow for British farmers to be undercut, I'm not convinced by that argument. Essentially, as far as I can tell from reports, I wasn't there myself, whenever delegates asked Sunak a question about some concern they have, his response was essentially, trust me, I'm on your side. Leave it to me. It'll be fine. Sunak's only trump card is that rural areas are used to voting Conservative. You know, when people sort of habitually vote a particular way, it's very difficult to break it. Most people don't even really consider it. They just always vote a particular way. So people in these areas are going to take more persuading to vote for a Labour Party, which was already promising to improve transport and housing before they thought they would be able to make serious inroads into rural Tory lands. So it may not have mattered that Sunak made a pig's ear of the basics of the speech. He began by saying good afternoon when his speech was in the morning. He then proceeded to find common ground with his audience. He goes, oh, I need to show them I'm one of them. I'm not going to chew an ear of corn. I know, I'll tell them I once milked a cow. Mind you, there was one good bit. Sunak seemed to talk about the lack of self-sufficiency in lettuces at one point. Now, I thought to myself, the bit about milking a cow, that can come across as condescending, right? But I believe he genuinely does have an interest in lettuces. After all, it was a lettuce that got him his job as Prime Minister, wasn't it? But what will matter is the very obvious panic setting in with the Tories. If you look at it this way, no Tory leader, since they came to power in 2010, and there's been 5, no Tory leader has addressed the NFU conference. Keir Starmer's already done so, he did so last year at least. Now, you don't necessarily expect the leader to attend all industry conferences. I mean, that's not feasible. There's too many. And they have sector-specific ministers or shadow ministers to cover the big ones anyway. Like normally it would be, you would send the DEFRA minister to talk to the NFU normally, yeah. But when a party only sends their leader to speak to the conference during the year of an election that they look like losing, it instantly makes you think they're doing it not because they particularly want to talk to you, but because they're worried about the supports that they've traditionally taken for granted. And then you think, when that leader is then unable to answer any questions other than to say, trust me, it doesn't seem likely that Sunak's won many converts. But as I said, this may be less about trying to persuade farmers and more about the much more numerous rural voter. You know, those tuned into politics will also be aware that recent polling suggests that Labour can actually win in some of the most rural areas of England. Absolutely unthinkable before this election. The Tories are losing their main pitch to these voters, which is that you've got a choice between us and the Lib Dems, and a vote for the Lib Dems is a guaranteed vote for an opposition MP representing you. Whereas, although voting for the Conservatives is not a guarantee of a voice in government, it does get you it most of the time. But the Conservatives rested on their laurels. They've only now taken notice of the fact that Labour can say the same. And people in rural England are listening. Consider that Labour have not suddenly started doing better in rural areas. Polls have been showing Labour gaining strength for 2 years now. Yet Sunak only now decides he needs to take rural votes seriously. It suggests that they thought the rural vote would just default to normal. Because he would have known last year that it was going badly. And he would have just thought, oh, they'll flip back for the election year. They'll flip back as if by magic. And only now are they realising that actually things are getting worse for them. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.